The restaurant was alive with chatter and the soft sound of plates clinking together. It was one of those places where the napkins were folded like art, and every waiter seemed to glide rather than walk. The kind of place where money didn't just buy food, it bought attention. That Friday evening, the dining room glowed under golden light. Groups of people in fancy clothes filled the tables, laughing too loudly, sipping wine too slowly, pretending they weren't looking at who just walked in. Near the entrance, a man stepped through the glass doors, with the kind of confidence that made people notice even before he spoke. He wore a dark suit that looked expensive enough to pay someone's rent for a month. His watch sparkled under the light, and the smirk on his face said he knew exactly what kind of attention he attracted. That was Ethan. He wasn't famous, but in his own world, he might as well have been. He owned several businesses, loved talking about them, and loved even more when people listened. Tonight he was there to impress a group of clients, and maybe himself. The hostess greeted him with a nervous smile, leading him to the reserved table in the center of the room. He followed, nodding slightly, barely acknowledging her. When they arrived, he pulled out his own chair and sat down as if he owned the place. "Perfect spot," he said, glancing around. "Everyone can see us." Across the room, Lila, a young waitress, watched quietly as she refilled glasses and checked on customers. She had worked there for a year, long enough to recognize what kind of man Ethan was after just a few seconds. The type who snapped his fingers for service and complained if his water wasn't cold enough, but she didn't let that bother her. Not anymore. Lila had learned to smile through almost anything. She needed this job, not because she loved serving people who looked down on her, but because it paid for her rent, her mother's medicine, and slowly, her dream. There was an old piano in the corner of the restaurant. No one played it anymore. The owner had once hired a pianist for weekends, but business had slowed down. Sometimes, when the restaurant was empty after closing, Lila would sit there just for a few minutes, pressing the keys softly so the sound wouldn't reach the kitchen. Music had once been her world, before life became about surviving instead of dreaming. As the night went on, the restaurant grew louder. Lila balanced plates and trays, weaving between tables. She could feel her back aching, but she kept that same polite smile that every server learned to wear like armor. When she finally reached Ethan's table, she could already sense the tone. The air felt different. Louder laughter, sharp comments, the clinking of wine glasses. His clients were leaning in, laughing at jokes that weren't really funny. Ethan looked up at her as she approached. Finally," he said. "I was starting to think you forgot us." Lila kept her voice calm. "I'm sorry for the wait, sir. What can I get you all tonight?" He raised an eyebrow. "Sir, I like that. You hear that, everyone? She's polite." He looked at her name tag. "Lila, pretty name." "You don't look like a Lila, though." His friends chuckled quietly. Lila gave a small professional smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "Would you like to start with some drinks?" she asked. They placed their orders and she walked away, her shoulders tight. In the kitchen, she took a deep breath before heading back out. Nights like these always tested her patience. When she returned with their drinks, Ethan was in full story mode, telling his guests about his rough beginnings and how he built everything from scratch. Lila had heard versions of that story 100 times, from people who treated humility like a performance. He gestured widely as he spoke, almost spilling his wine. "You see, the secret isn't hard work. It's knowing how to make people work for you." His guests laughed again. Lila set the drinks down carefully. "Anything else I can get for you?" Ethan looked up. "Actually, yeah. Tell me something. You like working here?" The question caught her off guard. She blinked, unsure how to answer. "It's a good job," she said softly. He smiled, leaning back. "Good? You call serving people like me good?" One of his friends chuckled, sensing the tension but saying nothing. Lila didn't flinch. "It pays the bills," she said, still calm. Ethan tilted his head. "I like honesty. You're not one of those girls who pretend they love it here, huh?" "I try to do my best," she said. He smirked. "And what's your dream, Lila? Or did you give that up?" The table laughed again, thinking it was all harmless teasing. But Lila's stomach tightened. She didn't want to answer. She wanted to walk away. But years of working in service jobs had taught her walking away wasn't an option. She glanced toward the piano in the corner, its surface dusty under the soft light. "I used to play," she said quietly. "Music, piano." Ethan raised an eyebrow. You, a pianist? He laughed. That's cute. The others smiled politely, unsure if they should join in. Lila forced another small smile. Yes, sir. I used to study before I started working. Ethan took a sip of wine and looked toward the piano. Well, there's one right there. Maybe you should prove it. The table laughed again, and this time louder. Lila froze for a moment. It's just for decoration, she said, trying to move on, but Ethan leaned forward. Come on, what's the harm? Let's see if you can still play. I'll even give you a tip for it. His voice carried across the restaurant. A few nearby tables turned to look. Her cheeks burned. I'm sorry, sir. I really can't. He interrupted her, pulling a crisp $100 bill from his wallet and waving it with a grin. What, you're too good for it? It's easy money. The laughter at the table got louder. The manager at the counter noticed the scene, watching carefully. Lila stood there, tray in hand, unsure what to do. Every instinct told her to walk away. But walking away meant losing her job, and she couldn't afford that. Ethan leaned back, clearly enjoying the attention. Come on, we're all waiting. The room had gone quieter now. Even people who didn't know what was happening could feel the tension. The manager finally stepped forward. Sir, he said politely, we don't ask our staff to. Ethan cut him off. Relax, I'm just having a little fun. If she can play, let her play. If not, no harm done, right? Lila's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to disappear, but she also felt something stir, something she hadn't felt in a long time. That old spark of pride that came from sitting behind the keys, letting music speak when words couldn't. She looked at the piano again. It sat there quietly, waiting. Then she looked at Ethan, his smug grin, his careless eyes, the people around him laughing as if she were a joke. Something inside her shifted. Without another word, she placed her tray down on a nearby table and walked toward the piano. Her steps were slow but steady. The restaurant grew quieter with each one. Ethan chuckled. Well, this should be interesting. The other diners turned their heads, curious now. The noise of conversation faded until the only sound left was the soft hum of the air conditioner and the clink of a spoon somewhere in the back. Lila sat down on the bench. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the cover from the keys. A layer of dust rose into the air. She brushed it away gently, her fingertips tracing the worn ivory. For a moment, she just sat there, eyes closed. Memories came rushing back. Her father sitting beside her when she was a child, teaching her scales, her dream of performing on stage one day, the letters from the music school she couldn't afford to attend. And now, here she was, a waitress about to play for a man who only wanted to humiliate her. But maybe, she thought, this was her chance. Not to prove anything to him, but to remind herself who she really was. She took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. The first note echoed softly through the room. Then another, and in that instant everything changed. The first few notes floated into the air so gently that for a moment, no one was sure if they were real. Lila's fingers moved slowly at first, almost shyly, as if she was afraid the old piano might reject her touch. But the sound grew stronger, warmer, and before long the melody filled every corner of the restaurant. Conversations faded. The laughter, the clinking glasses, even the sound of the kitchen door swinging open, all stopped. It was as if time had paused to listen. Ethan sat back, his smirk fading slightly. He hadn't expected her to actually play, let alone play like this. Her hands moved with quiet confidence now, each note flowing into the next as though she had spent her entire life speaking this language made of sound. For everyone else, it was a surprise. But for Lila, it was like coming home. She had not played in front of anyone for years. The feel of the keys under her fingertips brought back memories she had buried. Nights spent practicing until her wrists ached, her father cheering from the kitchen table, the moment she learned her family could no longer afford lessons. Music carried all of that. The hope, the loss, and everything in between. As she played, her breathing slowed. The world around her disappeared. The piano, though slightly out of tune, responded like an old friend who had been waiting for her return. When she reached the middle of the piece, the tempo changed. The melody climbed higher, brighter, full of energy and pain at once. Ethan's guests, who moments ago had been laughing, now sat motionless. One of them lowered his glass slowly, staring in disbelief. Even the manager standing near the counter found himself frozen in place. A waiter near the door whispered, "I didn't know she could play like that." Someone else murmured, "That's incredible." Ethan didn't say a word. He tried to act casual, but he could feel something unfamiliar in his chest, a sting of humility. He had always thought of music as background noise, something that played in elevators or restaurants, never something that could silence a room. Yet here he was, unable to look away from the waitress he had mocked minutes ago. Lila's fingers trembled slightly near the end of the piece. She felt a wave of emotion swell inside her, sadness mixed with relief. It had been so long since she'd felt truly seen. Not as a server, not as someone struggling, but as herself. For those few minutes, she wasn't working a job. She was doing what she was born to do. When the final note faded, the silence that followed was almost heavier than the music itself. It hung in the air, soft and powerful, like a secret everyone shared. No one clapped right away. They just sat there, stunned. Then, slowly, one person began to clap. Another joined. Within seconds, the entire restaurant erupted in applause. Some people stood. A woman near the bar had tears in her eyes. The sound of clapping filled the space that moments ago had been filled with pride and noise. Lila looked down, embarrassed but smiling. She stood up, nodded slightly, and started to walk away from the piano. She didn't need applause. She had already won something far greater. But before she could take another step, Ethan stood up. "Wait," he said softly. His voice was different now, quieter, almost uncertain. The crowd fell silent again. He walked over to her, his polished shoes tapping gently against the floor. When he reached her, he held out the same $100 bill he had waved at her earlier. But his expression had changed. There was no arrogance left. Only regret. That was... He stopped, struggling to find the right words. "I didn't know you could play like that." Lila looked at him for a moment, then down at the bill. "I don't need your money," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, but it carried the strength of someone who had finally stood up for herself. Ethan blinked, then lowered his hand. For the first time that night, he had nothing clever to say. He just nodded slowly. "You're right," he said. "You don't." The manager stepped closer, unsure whether to intervene or just let the moment unfold. But it was clear. No one wanted to interrupt. Something about what had just happened felt sacred. Lila walked back to the service area, her co-workers watching her with admiration. One of them whispered, "That was beautiful," as she passed. She smiled politely but said nothing. Her heart was still racing. Her hands still trembled. It felt like she had just shared a piece of her soul with everyone there. Back at the table, Ethan sat down again, quieter now. His clients looked at him, unsure what to say. Finally, one of them muttered, "She's amazing." Ethan didn't respond. He just stared at his untouched glass of wine. For years, he had believed success was measured by wealth, power, and control. But that simple performance, from a waitress no less, had shaken something loose inside him. He thought about how he used to love the sound of the piano as a child, before his life became a list of deals and deadlines. He leaned back and exhaled slowly. "Maybe I deserved that," he said under his breath. When Lila returned to the dining area to collect empty plates, she kept her eyes down. She didn't want to make a scene or appear proud. But Ethan caught her attention as she passed his table again. "Lila," he said quietly. She stopped. "I owe you an apology." She hesitated, then looked at him. "It's fine," she said softly. "You don't have to." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have embarrassed you like that. You didn't deserve it." His tone was steady, sincere. "Thank you for reminding me what real talent looks like." Lila gave a small smile, not out of pity, but acknowledgement. "Thank you," she said, and then she walked away to tend to another table. The rest of the night passed differently. The restaurant seemed calmer, warmer. People spoke more quietly, as if afraid to disturb the memory of what had just happened. Even the kitchen staff peeked out from behind the swinging door, still talking about it. The old piano, once forgotten, now stood like a symbol in the corner, silent but powerful. After closing, when the last customer had left, the manager approached Lila as she was wiping down tables. "That was something special tonight," he said. "You've got real talent." She smiled, tired but happy. "Thank you. You ever think about playing again? Like, professionally?" She shrugged. "I used to dream about it, but dreams are expensive." He chuckled softly. "Maybe not all of them." Then he added, "You reminded everyone why we love this place. That kind of thing doesn't happen every day." Lila finished cleaning and gathered her things. Before leaving, she glanced at the piano one last time. It looked different now, brighter somehow even under the dim lights. She reached out and ran her fingers along the keys again, a quiet promise to herself that this wouldn't be the last time she played. Outside, the city lights reflected off the wet pavement. The cool night air felt fresh against her skin. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. She felt alive. Inside the restaurant, Ethan sat alone at his table long after everyone had gone. He stared at the piano, the same piano he had once used as a joke. He thought about what it meant, to have power, to have money, and still feel empty, and how a few minutes of music from someone he had underestimated could make him question everything. He finally stood, left a large tip on the table, and walked out quietly. As he reached the door, he looked back one last time. For a second, he imagined what it would be like to start over, to live with the kind of honesty he had just witnessed. The night closed behind him with the soft click of the door, and in the stillness the memory of the music lingered, long after the sound had faded. The next morning, sunlight poured through the thin curtains of Lila's small apartment. The air was cool and quiet, broken only by the soft hum of the city outside. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at her hands. They still felt the weight of the piano keys from the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still hear the melody. It was strange. She had played that song so many times in her life, yet it had never felt as alive as it did last night. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from one of her coworkers popped up. "You're all over the internet," it read, followed by a link. Lila frowned, confused. She clicked it, and her heart nearly stopped. Someone had filmed her performance. The video was already spreading online. Hundreds of comments, thousands of views. People calling her the waitress with the golden hands. She scrolled through the comments slowly, her eyes wide. This gave me chills. You can see her soul in every note. How can someone this talented be working in a restaurant? Lila sat back stunned. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She wasn't used to attention, especially not the kind that came from strangers on the internet. But as she read through the messages, a small spark of hope flickered inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan was sitting in his office, staring at the same video. His assistant had shown it to him earlier that morning. The clip was everywhere. News sites, social media, even local TV segments talking about the unexpected pianist who moved a room to tears. He watched it in silence. His usually confident posture slumped slightly. He had seen it happen with his own eyes. Yet watching it again made him feel something deeper, something uncomfortable, but necessary. He saw himself in the corner of the video, laughing before she started playing. Then he saw his face change as the music took over. It was like watching two different people, the man he had been and the man he didn't want to be anymore. He leaned back in his chair and sighed. "I really made a fool of myself," he muttered. But more than embarrassment, he felt guilt. The kind that sits heavy on your chest and refuses to leave. He picked up his phone and called the restaurant. "Hi," he said, clearing his throat. "I'd like to speak with the manager." When the manager answered, Ethan explained who he was. "Listen," he said, "I'd like to talk to Lila. I owe her more than just an apology. Do you think you could give her my number?" The manager hesitated. "I'm not sure that's a good idea. She's been through a lot since last night. That video blew up. Reporters have been calling the restaurant all morning. Ethan frowned. Reporters? Yeah, the manager said. They want interviews, stories. She hasn't said yes to anyone yet. She just asked for a quiet day. Ethan understood. All right, he said quietly. Please tell her I'd like to help her, if she'll let me. That evening, Lila went back to work. Unsure what kind of day it would be, when she arrived, her co-workers greeted her with cheers and smiles. You're famous, one of them said. We've never had this many people call for reservations. The manager smiled when he saw her. You might have just saved this place, he joked. Lila laughed softly but felt a bit overwhelmed. All she wanted was to do her job in peace, not become some kind of internet sensation. But deep down, she couldn't deny how it felt. The joy of being seen for who she really was. As the night went on, customers kept asking questions. Are you the girl from the video? Will you play again tonight? She smiled politely each time, shaking her head. Not tonight, she'd say. Maybe another time. Halfway through her shift, the manager called her over. There's someone asking to see you, he said. Lila's heart sank when she turned around and saw Ethan standing near the entrance, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. He looked different, not polished and proud like before, but humble, maybe even nervous. She hesitated before walking over. What are you doing here? She asked softly. He gave a small smile. I came to apologize, again, in person. He held out the flowers awkwardly. These are for you. Lila blinked, unsure what to say. You didn't have to do that. I know, he said. But I wanted to. He paused, searching for the right words. Look, I've spent years thinking money could buy respect. That being powerful meant being better than others. But last night you showed me what real strength looks like. I treated you unfairly. I'm sorry. There was a quiet sincerity in his voice that she hadn't heard before. Lila looked at the flowers for a moment before finally taking them. Thank you, she said softly. Apology accepted. Ethan smiled faintly. I saw the video. You were incredible. You should be performing on a stage, not serving tables. She laughed a little, not bitterly, but with honesty. It's not that easy. Life doesn't wait for dreams. Sometimes you just do what you have to do. He nodded. I get that. But maybe it's time someone helped you catch up to yours. She looked at him curiously. What do you mean? He took a breath. I own a foundation that supports young artists. We fund music schools, scholarships, programs. I'd like to sponsor you. You have real talent, Lila. You shouldn't have to hide it. Her eyes widened slightly. You'd really do that? Yes, he said without hesitation. Not because I feel guilty, because you deserve it. For a long moment, she didn't speak. The idea seemed unreal. She had spent so many years believing her chance was gone. Now here it was, standing in front of her, holding flowers, offering her a second chance. I'll think about it, she said finally. It's a big decision. Of course, he said, smiling gently. Take your time. He left quietly after that, not wanting to make a scene. The moment lingered in Lila's mind for the rest of the night. She couldn't stop thinking about it. Not just his offer, but the way he had changed. He didn't seem like the same man who had mocked her. Something about the music had reached him too. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Lila sat down at the piano again. The restaurant was dark except for a few lights near the bar. She rested her fingers on the keys and began to play softly. This time it wasn't for anyone else, and when it was for herself, the melody flowed easily, warm and full of peace. For the first time in years, she felt like she was playing toward something instead of away from it. Across town, Ethan sat alone in his apartment, scrolling through the comments under the video again. One caught his attention. Sometimes it takes the right song to wake up the right person. He smiled faintly. It felt true. The music had done something no lecture, no deal, no amount of money ever could. It had made him see people differently, made him see himself differently. The next day, Lila met with Ethan again at a quiet cafe. He explained how the sponsorship worked, how it could cover her training, her instruments, even help her record her own music someday. She listened carefully, still unsure if she could believe it. Why me? She asked finally. He smiled. Because the world needs more people like you, people who remind us what really matters. Lila looked down, her heart full. Then I'll do it, she said. I'll give it a try, Ethan grinned. Good, you won't regret it. In that small moment, a new chapter began for both of them. One built not on pride or apology, but on something simple and honest: respect. From that day on, things slowly started to change. Lila began taking lessons again, working with a teacher Ethan introduced her to. She practiced every day after work, staying late at the restaurant, letting the music echo through the empty room. People still came by asking for the waitress who played that night, but she didn't mind anymore. Now, she knew her worth wasn't in serving plates. It was in every note she played, every dream she refused to give up. Ethan came by sometimes, not as a customer, but as a friend. He'd sit quietly, listening as she played, never interrupting, never making it about himself. In those quiet evenings, both of them found something they hadn't known they were: missing peace. The night that had started with arrogance and humiliation had turned into something neither of them could have imagined. It wasn't just about forgiveness or talent. It was about how one act of kindness, one moment of truth, could change two lives forever. The weeks that followed brought quiet changes neither Lila nor Ethan could have predicted. For the first time in years, Lila felt like her life was moving forward. She still worked at the restaurant, but the piano no longer gathered dust in the corner. Every Friday night, the manager encouraged her to play a few songs before the dinner rush. People came not just for the food anymore, they came to listen to her. The first evening she played again, the room filled up before the doors officially opened. Strangers smiled at her, recording little clips to post online. Some asked for photos afterward. It was strange and a little overwhelming, but it made her heart full. Ethan kept his word. He arranged for her to meet a professional piano teacher, someone who had worked with rising artists before. Her name was Clara, a kind woman in her 50s who carried herself with warmth. When they met, Clara shook Lila's hand and said, "You've got something special, not just talent, but honesty. You play like someone who's lived." Those words stayed with Lila for days. Her lessons began the following week. Every afternoon she would finish her shift, take the bus to the music school, and practice for hours. Her fingers ached sometimes, but she didn't mind. Each note felt like a small victory, a step closer to the life she had once dreamed about. Ethan often checked in on her progress, though never in a pushy way. Sometimes he'd stop by the restaurant, quietly listening from the back. Other times he'd send her encouraging messages or new sheet music to try. He never asked for anything in return. For him, helping her was a way of repairing something in himself, a part that had gone silent for years. One evening, after a long lesson, Lila sat alone in the practice room. The lights were dim and the echoes of her last note still lingered in the air. Clara had left already, reminding her to rest her hands, but Lila stayed a while longer, just sitting there. She thought about how much had changed in so little time. She still had bills, still worked late shifts, but now there was a spark inside her, a reason to keep going. As she played a few soft chords, the door opened quietly. Ethan stepped inside, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I figured you'd still be here," he said with a smile. Lila looked up, surprised. "You didn't have to come." "I wanted to," he said, handing her a cup. "You've been working hard. Thought you could use a break." She took the cup and smiled. "Thanks. It's been a long day." He sat down on the bench beside her, careful not to crowd her. The air felt calm between them, not awkward, just peaceful. After a moment, Ethan spoke. "You know, I've been thinking about that night a lot, the way you played, and it did something to me." Lila looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" He sighed softly. "I spent so many years chasing success, trying to prove something. I built everything I thought I wanted. But that night, when you played, I realized I couldn't even remember the last time I truly felt anything. I think I forgot what mattered." Lila listened quietly. "Maybe it's not too late to remember." He smiled at that. Maybe not. For a moment, they sat in silence, the kind that feels comfortable instead of empty. Lila turned back to the piano. "Want to hear something I've been working on?" Ethan nodded. "I'd like that." She began to play, something new, a piece she had written herself. It was soft at first, then grew stronger, more confident. The melody carried traces of hope, forgiveness, and a quiet kind of courage. Ethan closed his eyes, letting it wash over him. When she finished, he said nothing at first. Then, in a low voice, he whispered, "That's beautiful." Lila smiled. It's not perfect yet. It doesn't have to be, he said. It's real. From that night on, they became unlikely friends. They met often, sometimes to discuss her music, sometimes just to talk. Ethan began to share stories from his own life, things he had never told anyone. He spoke about how his father had always measured worth in numbers and achievements, and how he had spent his whole life trying not to disappoint him. Somewhere along the way, he realized he had become the same kind of man, demanding, cold, distant. I guess I forgot how to be kind, he said once. Until that night reminded me. Lila didn't know what to say, so she just listened. Sometimes that was enough. As the weeks turned into months, her playing grew even better. Clara encouraged her to enter a local music competition, something small but respected. You're ready, she said. You've got a story people need to hear. At first, Lila hesitated. I don't know if I can. I've never competed before, Clara smiled. You've already faced worse than any competition, Ethan agreed. You should do it, he said. You've worked too hard not to, so she did. For the next few weeks, Lila practiced more than ever. Her co-workers cheered her on. Her manager even adjusted her shifts so she could make time for rehearsals. Every note she played carried a piece of her journey, the nights she cried in silence, the customers she smiled for even when she was exhausted, and the man who once humiliated her, but now believed in her. More than anyone, the day of the competition arrived on a cool Saturday evening. The small concert hall buzzed with quiet excitement. Ethan sat near the front row, hands clasped tightly. Clara sat beside him, smiling proudly. When Lila stepped on stage, she felt her knees shake. The lights were bright, and for a moment all the faces blurred together. But then she remembered something Clara had told her. Don't play for them. Play for you. She took a deep breath and began. The music flowed out of her like water, gentle, strong, unstoppable. She wasn't the waitress from the restaurant anymore. She wasn't the girl who gave up on her dream. She was herself, fully, fearlessly. The sound filled the hall, reaching every heart in the room. Even the judges seemed to forget to take notes for a moment. When she finished, the silence felt almost sacred. Then came the applause, loud, long, heartfelt. Lila bowed her head, tears glistening in her eyes. She couldn't believe it. For the first time, she wasn't surviving. She was living. After the show, Ethan and Clara rushed to congratulate her. You were incredible, Clara said, hugging her tightly. I told you you were ready. Ethan smiled proudly. You did it, Lila. She looked at him, laughter mixing with tears. We did it. Later that night, as they walked outside, the city lights sparkled like stars scattered across the ground. Lila felt the cool breeze brush against her face. You know, she said softly, I used to think people like you and me lived in different worlds, but maybe we were both just lost in our own ways. Ethan nodded slowly. Maybe that's why we found each other. They stood there for a moment, silent, watching the city move around them. In that stillness, there was no pride, no pity, only understanding. Life had a strange way of connecting people when they least expected it. As they said goodnight, Ethan looked at her and said, You've got a bright future ahead of you. Lila, don't ever let anyone make you forget that, not even yourself, she smiled. I won't, and thank you. For everything. When he walked away, she watched him go. Not as the arrogant man she once met, but as a friend who had learned how to be human again. That night, back in her apartment, Lila sat at her small piano, one Ethan had helped her buy. She played softly, her heart full. The melody drifted through the window into the quiet night. It was a song about new beginnings, forgiveness and the beauty of second chances, and somewhere out there, perhaps Ethan could still hear it, the same music that had once silenced a room now echoing as a reminder. That kindness, once found, never really fades away. The competition had opened a new door for Lila, and she stepped through it with both wonder and hesitation. Her name began to appear in local newspapers and online blogs. People talked about the girl who had once been a waitress and now moved hearts through her piano. The restaurant where she worked grew busier than ever. Some came for the food, others just to catch a glimpse of her. But fame, even in small doses, brought new challenges she wasn't used to. Every night after her shift, Lila stayed behind to help the new servers. She didn't like being treated as someone special. She still wiped tables, folded napkins, and smiled at customers. But sometimes she could feel their eyes on her, admiration mixed with curiosity. Some asked for photos. Others wanted to hear her story again. She would just smile politely and say, "It's a long one." Ethan kept his distance at first, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. He was proud of her, of course, but he had his own life to fix. The company he owned had been running smoothly, but for the first time he started caring about more than just profits. He visited his employees more often, listened to their ideas, and even joined them for lunch. People noticed the change, but no one questioned it. They just appreciated that their boss finally seemed human. One quiet afternoon, Ethan received an email from a charity organization planning a music gala. They wanted him to sponsor the event, and one of the organizers mentioned inviting Lila to perform. Without hesitation, he agreed. The idea of seeing her play again, this time on a real stage, filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. When he told Lila about it, she looked surprised. "A gala, that sounds big." "It is," he said, smiling. "But you belong there. This is your time." She hesitated. "What if I mess up?" "Then you start over," he replied. "That's what music and life are about." Her eyes softened at his words. "I'll think about it." Over the next few weeks, she practiced endlessly, not just to impress anyone, but to honor the journey that had brought her here. Sometimes she played in front of an empty restaurant after closing. The lights would be dim, and the sound of the piano would echo softly through the quiet room. It was in those moments she felt closest to her past, and her father, who had always believed in her dream. As the night of the gala approached, the city buzzed with excitement. The event would be held at the Grand Symphony Hall, a place Lila had once walked past as a child, peering through its tall windows, imagining what it would be like to perform inside. Now that dream was real. Still, she couldn't help feeling nervous. The day before the event, Ethan visited her during rehearsal. He found her sitting at the piano, staring at the keys without playing. "You look like you're about to run away," he joked gently. She smiled faintly. "Maybe I am. It's a lot to take in." "You faced worse," he said, sitting nearby. "The first time I saw you, you faced a room full of people waiting for you to fail. And you didn't just prove them wrong, you changed everything." Lila looked at him. "That night changed you too, didn't it?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, it did." She gave a small smile. Then maybe it was meant to happen. The next evening, the hall glowed under golden lights. People arrived in elegant clothes, the sound of soft chatter filling the air. The theme of the night was hope through harmony. Every performer had a story, stories of resilience, recovery, and dreams that refused to die. Lila sat backstage, hands trembling slightly. Clara was there too, offering comfort and calm words. "Remember," she said softly, "you're not here to impress anyone. You're here to speak through your music." When Lila's name was announced, the crowd applauded politely, not yet knowing who she was. She walked on stage, her simple blue dress catching the light. She took a deep breath, sat at the piano, and let her fingers rest on the keys. For a moment, she looked into the audience and saw Ethan sitting near the front, watching her with a steady, reassuring smile. That was all she needed. The first notes were soft, like a whisper, a quiet confession. The piece she played was one she had written herself, a story told through melody. It spoke of loss and discovery, of pain had turned into peace. As she played, something inside her loosened. The fear, the doubts, the memories of humiliation and hardship. Every chord carried emotion so pure that even those who didn't know her story could feel it. The hall fell silent, completely still. No coughs, no murmurs, just her music filling the space. Somewhere in the middle of the piece, Ethan closed his eyes. He remembered that first night at the restaurant, how his arrogance had made him blind to the kindness of others. He remembered her face that evening, how calm she had been despite everything. And now, seeing her here, he felt something that couldn't be described as pride mixed with redemption. When Lila finished, she lifted her hands from the piano and let the final notes fade naturally into silence. It was a silence heavy with emotion, the kind that holds 1,000 unspoken words. Then, as if the audience had been holding their breath, applause erupted. Strong, genuine, endless. People stood, clapping until their hands hurt. Some even shouted her name. Lila stood up, overwhelmed. She smiled through tears, bowing slightly. It was more than applause. It was acceptance, understanding, forgiveness. For a moment she forgot the cameras, the lights, the crowd. All she could feel was gratitude. For the music, for life, for the strange twist of fate that had brought her here. After the performance, people came up to congratulate her. Musicians, organizers, even strangers wanted to tell her how much her music had moved them. One woman said, "I came here sad tonight, but your song made me believe again." Lila didn't know what to say. She just hugged her, silently thankful. Later she found Ethan outside the hall, leaning against a pillar, looking proud but quiet. When he saw her, his face lit up. "You were incredible," he said. "I don't think anyone in there will ever forget that." She smiled shyly. "I didn't do it alone. You helped me believe I could." He shook his head. "All I did was remind you of who you already were." They stood together in the soft glow of the city lights. Cars passed by, people laughed in the distance, and for a while neither of them spoke. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was the kind that said more than words ever could. Finally, Lila said, "You know what I realized tonight? That piano. It used to scare me. Every time I sat down, I thought of everything I'd lost. But now it feels like home again." Ethan nodded. "It's because you found your voice. And once you do, nothing can take it away." She smiled. "You sound like Clara." He chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." That night, after they said goodbye, Ethan walked home feeling lighter than he had in years. For so long, he had believed that wealth was the measure of success. But now, watching someone else's dream bloom because of a small act of kindness, he finally understood what it meant to live with purpose. As for Lila, she returned to her apartment and sat by her window, looking out at the quiet city. She thought about how far she'd come, from a waitress who played for survival to an artist who played for love. The piano sat in the corner, gleaming softly under the lamp. She walked over, sat down, and began to play the same melody she had performed that night, slower, gentler. It was hers now, completely, beautifully hers. Outside, the wind carried the sound through the open window, into the sleeping city. It mingled with the night air, soft and unassuming, touching hearts of people who didn't even know her name, and that was enough. She didn't need fame or wealth or recognition. She had her music, she had peace, and somewhere across town, Ethan, unable to sleep, opened his window. He thought he heard a faint tune, familiar, comforting. He smiled to himself, knowing that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the people we least expect and the moments we never plan. The sound faded slowly, like a dream slipping away, but its warmth stayed with him long after the night had passed. Months passed after the gala, and life began to take on a new rhythm for both Lila and Ethan. The excitement had settled, but what remained was something deeper: peace, gratitude, and quiet growth. The restaurant had turned into a small landmark in the city, known not just for its food but for the warm music that filled it each weekend. Lila still played there sometimes, not because she had to, but because it felt like home. The sound of the piano had become part of the restaurant's soul. Ethan visited every so often, usually sitting at his favorite table near the back. He didn't come to impress anyone or show off his wealth anymore. He came to listen. The same man who once demanded attention now found comfort in silence and simply being another person in the crowd. He watched Lila play, her fingers moving gracefully across the keys, and it reminded him of how far they both had come. One evening, after her last song, Lila joined him. "You always sit in the same spot?" she teased, smiling. "Habit," he said with a small laugh. "I guess I'm a creature of comfort." "You used to be a creature of arrogance," she said playfully. He laughed again, shaking his head. "I deserved that." They talked about small things: her new students at the community center, his recent decision to fund scholarships for young musicians. It wasn't something he announced publicly. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to help quietly, the way someone had once helped him find himself again. After a pause, Lila said softly, "You know, I still think about that night sometimes, the one where it all started. It feels like a lifetime ago." Ethan nodded. "It does. But I'm glad it happened. I didn't understand it then, but it changed everything for me. You taught me something that no deal or contract ever could. Lila tilted her head. And what's that? That kindness and talent can't be bought, he said. They come from the heart. She smiled. That's a good lesson. He looked at her thoughtfully. So what's next for you? I've been thinking about starting my own music school, she said. Something small, for kids who can't afford lessons. I know what it's like to want something so badly and not have the chance. Ethan's eyes softened. That's a beautiful idea. I'll help you if you'll let me. I'll let you buy the first piano, she said with a grin. Deal, he replied, smiling. Over the next few months, they worked together on the project. They found a small building on the corner of an old street, a place with creaky floors and large windows that let the sunlight pour in every morning. It needed a lot of work, but to them, it was perfect. Lila spent hours painting the walls, choosing colors that felt warm and welcoming. Ethan helped with the renovations, surprising everyone who knew him. The man who once paid others to handle every detail was now rolling up his sleeves and doing the work himself. The school opened on a quiet Sunday morning. The first students arrived. Children of all ages, their faces full of wonder. Some came from families who had never been able to afford lessons before. Lila welcomed each one with a smile, showing them around the small classroom and the shining piano in the corner. She told them, "This place is for you. You don't have to be perfect, just play from your heart." Ethan watched from the doorway, feeling something warm in his chest. He remembered the first time he saw her play, the moment that had stopped time itself. Now, she was giving that same gift to others. Weeks turned into months and the school flourished. The children adored Lila, and their laughter filled the rooms like music of its own. She held small recitals every few months, inviting parents and neighbors to come watch. Ethan attended every single one. Each performance reminded him that sometimes the smallest moments lead to the greatest changes. One evening after a recital, when everyone had gone home, Lila sat at the piano and began to play softly. Ethan lingered nearby, listening. The melody was gentle, full of gratitude. When she finished, she looked up and said, "You know, I used to think the world was unfair, but now I realize it's just waiting for people to make it better." He nodded slowly. "And you've done that." "So have you," she replied. "You gave me a chance when you didn't have to." He smiled faintly. Maybe I was giving myself a chance too. They sat quietly for a while, the hum of the city outside blending with the sound of distant laughter. For both of them, this wasn't just the end of a story. It was the start of something new, something honest and lasting. As the years passed, the school grew. Lila hired more teachers, and soon there were 2 more branches in nearby towns. Her name became known not for fame, but for the kindness and hope she spread. People often called her the woman who played her way into hearts. Ethan continued to support her behind the scenes, but he never took credit. He had learned that real satisfaction came from helping others quietly, without applause. He spent more time with his employees, treating them like family. The man who once measured success by numbers now measured it by smiles and stories. One afternoon, years later, a young reporter visited Lila's school. She wanted to write a feature about her journey, from waitress to teacher, from broken dreams to fulfilled purpose. During the interview, the reporter asked, "What kept you going when things were hard?" Lila smiled, her eyes soft with memory. "Music," she said simply. "It was the one thing that never left me, even when I lost everything else." "And the man who helped you, what does he mean to you?" the reporter asked. She paused for a long moment. "He reminded me that even broken people can help others heal," she said. "And sometimes the people we least expect turn out to be the ones who save us, not by rescuing us, but by believing in us when we can't believe in ourselves." The article went viral. People everywhere were touched by her story, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. It was about change, humility, and the quiet power of kindness. The world needed that reminder. Ethan read the article one evening while sitting alone in his office. When he finished, he smiled and folded the newspaper carefully. He didn't call her to talk about it. He didn't need to. He knew she meant every word, and that was enough. A few weeks later, Lila invited him to a special event, the school's anniversary concert. She told him, "You can't miss this one." He promised he wouldn't. When the night arrived, the hall was packed with families, students, and supporters. The stage was decorated with flowers and photographs from the school's early days. Lila took the stage at the end, thanking everyone who had been part of the journey. Then she said, "There's someone here tonight who believed in me before the world did. This song is for him." She sat down at the piano and began to play. The melody was soft, full of warmth and life. Ethan listened, his heart heavy and full all at once. The room disappeared. It was just her and the music again. When the final note faded, he wiped away a tear before anyone could see. After the concert, Lila found him in the crowd. "You liked it?" she asked. He smiled. It was perfect. She handed him a small framed picture, a photo of the old restaurant piano, taken the night everything began. On the bottom she had written, "Thank you for hearing me when no one else did." He looked at it speechless for a moment. Then he said softly, "I should be the one thanking you." Years later, when people spoke of Lila's legacy, they always mentioned the way she made others feel, that they mattered, that their stories had meaning. And when they spoke of Ethan, they said he was a man who had once lost his way but found it again through compassion. Their paths had crossed by accident, but what came from it was something timeless. Not a story of wealth or fame, but of hearts changed through music, humility, and grace. And even long after the last song was played, the sound of that piano still seemed to echo, a quiet reminder that kindness, once given, never truly fades away.